Um, so if y'all don't mind, Cindy's going to record this because we had a few people who couldn't make it today. And so as y'all know, this is kind of fairly informal. But I just thought it would be good to answer any questions and just kind of go over a little bit because it's been a little bit since we've done, kind of a recap of the grants. So if you have a question while I'm talking, either raise your hand or just throw it in the chat box, and I'll try to keep an eye on those to answer those as we go. So I thought I would kind of just talk about just overall things about the grants, and I don't mean to insult anyone's intelligence, but I'm just going to kind of go on what we have seen. As y'all know, the process for all of our grants now, we actually use people in the community to review them. It's not necessarily content expert, it's just people involved in the community. So the grants are actually sent to them. They review them, they score them, and then we meet in person to review the scoring and, answer, any questions, and then also reach back out to you guys if something's not clear. And then from that, they make their recommendations, and then it goes to a subset of our board, a grants committee. They in turn review them, and then they send them on to the full board for their review and approval. So that's kind of that's the process we go through for all of our grant rounds now, not just community impact. The one thing I will say, and I'm going to probably repeat this multiple times because last year, particularly for community impact, you have to select a category. So like art or humans, or, there's multiple categories. Just double check that because we had a couple who checked the wrong category and they weren't even reasonably close. And so they got kicked out, not because it was not a great project or anything. It was just, they just checked the wrong box. And so the good thing about our new system, and I know some of you, it's a love-hate relationship even with me with our new system, but you can come in and out of it multiple times. And so if you need to, let somebody else review it, before you literally hit that submit button. And if worst comes to worst happens and you've hit submit and all of a sudden you realized it, and you do get a copy back, unless it's after the deadline, we can go back in and open it back up. But the main thing is to try to review all that before we get it. So, and if you're not sure, reach out to me. I can't tell you what category to select, but I can kind of help you talk through, the other ones that tend to be in those buckets. For some of the grant rounds, this is not true for everybody, but one of the new features we had last year is eligibility quizzes. I know it's probably not a big deal to you guys, but we tend to get a good many. I think the link to our grant apps must go literally all over the web. And so we get a lot of what I would consider junk. We get people who apply who don't read the directions, who think, oh, my project's just so great. And I know I'm not in your community, but you're going to, fund me anyway. And so that actually just kind of filters those out. And so we are having a little bit of an issue right now with the returning grantees on eligibility quizzes. And I've just been on a chat this morning. So I think we have figured out how to fix it. So after we get off this call, I'll try to get that fixed this morning. If not, I'll have it fixed this afternoon. So some of you early birds, as soon as that got posted, you started trying to apply. So I appreciate your eagerness, but anyway, but thanks, we caught that. The other thing is read the application questions carefully. I know this sounds kind of redundant and ridiculous. And if you're not sure what the question is, what's being asked, reach out to me. I try to be accessible. You can email me, call me, and we'll go over that. I can't tell you how much angst I get when we get an application. It's a really great idea, but yet, the application is not filled out properly or the questions aren't answered. And so that's really important I can't stress enough to reread and all of that to make sure. So has anybody got any questions about that so far? And you notice we did eliminate some questions last year too. So we're trying to kind of streamline that a little bit. I don't know if anybody is on the call today about the church grants, but I'll hit that one first. All of these right now are basically going to be opening up. They opened up this week on the 15th, and then they will close on the 30th. And you should get a reminder about, I think it's a few days before they're due, just to say, hey, and then if you start a draft and you don't apply, then I clear them out after it closes. But the church grants, there is a $50,000 limit in the pool. That's the maximum amount of money that we have available. This is the only grant that's required, but we do have a 25% match. And I tell people all the time, I didn't make these rules, the donor did. And so don't get mad at me. And this only will apply for assistance to, and here's a couple of the other caveats for it, is that the funds are only available for predominantly African-American churches in Carroll County only. The church has been in existence a minimum of 10 years. Also, there is a 3-year maximum award, so you can only apply and receive funds 3 times. And I know some people have already bumped up against that. So once that becomes an issue, I'll go back to the donor and see if we can do a reset. But right now there's a 3-year maximum award on that. The funds can only be used for capital only. We can't buy furniture. If you've got brown paint and you want pink paint, we can't do that. But primarily what they're wanting to do is, and we also can't do parking lots. We get a lot of requests for parking lots and we can't do those. But really the funds are available for repairs. I know we have fixed a boatload of water damage through the years. So mold, mildew, if you need handicap accessibility, if you need a ramp, if you need, to work on a bathroom to make it handicap accessible, those are tens of things that they like to fund. Also, too, because there is a $50,000 limit of the amount that's available, please don't ask for the full 50 because you're not going to get it. Just be real blunt. We try to make that money go as far as we possibly can. And so last year, I think I literally had a request for $150,000. And so that one didn't last very long, on the table. It was a quick trip in and out. And I will tell you too, you can also upload photos of where you want the work to be done. That's helpful too. I do try to do site visits on those, so I can kind of get a handle when I'm talking to the panels about that one. Because sometimes seeing is believing. What it sounds like on paper, what it looks like in reality is sometimes 2 different things. And so also to make sure you've got good estimates. We've had some folks who thought they knew what it was going to cost, and particularly right now with construction costs escalating, they came back and said, we don't have enough money. And I'm like, I'm sorry, there's no other way for me to go get more money to finish this project. So we kind of had to scale some things back. So that's the church grants. Also too, for this year, that grant round has been renamed to honor the life of Lurleen V. Holland. It's now known as the Lurleen V. Holland Memorial Church Improvement Fund. Many of y'all may have known Miss Lurleen through the years. She recently passed away, and the donor wanted to honor her and her work and her church and in this community. So we're very glad to make that change to honor Miss Lurleen. The next one on my list is the Trinka Davis. Again, there's an eligibility quiz on this one. Again, read the applications and also the guidelines. I tweaked a couple of things on some of the guidelines this time. Nothing major, but do read to make sure that you're eligible. That one, again, is a Carroll County only restricted, and you have to provide direct services to veterans. And so if you're not quite sure if what you're asking for money for fits that criteria, or that kind of stuff, sure, feel free to reach out to me for that. There's 30,600, which is a smidge more than what we had last year for that grant round. So that's the Trinka Davis one. Again, if you ask for 2/3 of that money, chances are you might not get it. We try to make that money go as far as we possibly can, but we have funded the Deserve Band of the Fast. We have done home delivered meals for veterans. We have done some mental health initiatives for veterans out of that money. So there's been a pretty widespread funding type of things through the year. So if you have some questions about that one, what you're trying to do or wanting to do, just let me know. The other one, I don't know if we have any teachers on the call today, but the art enrichment grants, those can go to public school music, art, and drama teachers. In Carroll, Harrelson, Heard County, there is a maximum request of that of $1,000. One of the frequent questions I get for that is there's an art teacher and a band teacher at the same school. Both of those can apply. It's not necessarily one application for school. So if you've got all three of those folks in your building, you also can apply. And also there are some, I don't think we have that many now, but there are some teachers who teach at more than one school. So they can apply for each of those schools. So if you're at, Maple Street and Main Street schools, you could apply for up to $1,000 for both. And sometimes we have teachers who don't even ask for the full thousand. And so we actually have a bucket of around $25,000 for those. So if a school asks for less than that, then that just gives us a little more money to fund a 26th or 27th one. And the family has been known to bump that up a few years. If we've got just one or two that's going to be left out in the cold, then they'll do that. Those funds can be used for a number of things. They can provide money for what I call supplies. So one year, I bet we bought 10 tons of clay. Everybody and their brother was making things out of clay one year. And just so you know, if you don't have a kiln, there's a thing called air clay. So you don't have to have a kiln. But that was, that will pay for, paints, general supplies for your, art program, our music. I think we bought a boatload of music through the years. You also, if you need what I call more durable equipment, so if you need a kiln, music equipment, lights, those types of things, and you can find something, or maybe the $1,000 will go toward, something bigger. And also, I should have mentioned on the supplies, we have been asked, we have a Title I middle school, can't remember now where it is, and they had asked for like reeds and oils and things like that because they were able to get instruments donated, but then they needed some maintenance items. And so we've done that in the past too. And then the third category under that grant is what I call artist in residence. And so maybe you want to bring a clinician in to work with your band, or we have paid for accompanists when they're getting ready for their small and large group competitions. And, not as many people play piano anymore. So they would like to use those funds to bring in a professional pianist to work with their students. And we have paid for that in the past. So, so that's kind of some categories about that. So does anybody have any questions about Shrinka or art enrichment before we move on to the next one? No. Okay, good deal. Also, one other quick question about the art grants is the budget. I don't need to know you're going to buy 27 purple pencils. I don't need to know that. But if you just want to do general art supplies to include, paper, paint, art pencils, or whatever you want to do. I mean, we don't necessarily have to have an itemized list on those. And I will say, kind of for all of these, if there's going to be some sticking points for these grants, it tends sometimes to be the budget part. The budget, for whatever reason, tends to trip people up. I don't mean to insult anybody's intelligence, but please add your numbers up, because the grant panels do. And you would be surprised at how many times, number one, the budget numbers don't add up. And then when you do the budget as in compared to what you're asking for, that number doesn't add up either. And so just really check your math just to make sure that's not an issue. The community impact and power of the person, I'm not going to spend too much time on those. And I'm sorry if that's what you're on the call about. We're going to probably do another call when those are due a little bit later. But I can tell you, oh my goodness, I thought I could tell you right quick. We do have a little more money this year. We are not doing an innovation round this year. But the community impact grants, I think, gosh, I hate to tell you, I know there's a big difference in this number. It's either 430 or 450. So we do have a bump in the amount of money we have for those. And power of the purse is a little bit more. It's between like 16.5 or 17 this year. So that's a little bit more. But we'll kind of do an in-depth call on those because they open up. Power of the purse opens up, I think, May 1st, and then community impact opens June 1. I will tell you, we've shortened the window on community impact because they opened, like in April or earlier before, and nobody, really applied that early. No looking at anybody here, but I totally get it. And so 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 I thought, you know what, I'm just going to save myself some grief and push that out. So, but they're still due that first and around that first Friday in August. But as you're kind of thinking about grant applications, I'll kind of tell you the comments I've heard, quote unquote, around the table when the panels review them. And I call these kind of my hot button issues. And it kind of changes from year to year, but the one that consistently has come up, and I think y'all might find this interesting, is board composition. That has been a big, big issue with these panels. They don't like to see 2 people on a board. You don't have to have 50 people on a board, but you need to have, relative to the size of your organization, you need to have a good governance structure. And I think in light of kind of the nonprofit world in general, board composition is becoming increasingly more scrutinized to see kind of who is governing this organization. Do they have the expertise? Do they have, are they geographically spaced to where, and this is a bigger issue, I think, for some of the national folks that try to apply for money, like Red Cross and those kind of people. But, do you have, because obviously, all of this money has to benefit the residents of our 3 counties. And so if you're an organization where, I'll just say you have like a kids camp or whatever, we're only going to be interested in the kids from our 3 counties. That doesn't mean that you can't preclude or bring in kids from other counties, but our money has to be tracked to specifically benefit our, quote, our children. So, so that's one thing you got to be, so flipping that over to the board composition, in that you've got to have some local input if you're going to be, working with our families, our children, our community, period. So that's something to think about. But it also, if you provide a program where there's, let's say, counseling or something like that, or you provide mental health services, that they tend to look at the board to see if, you have expertise to be able to run that programming, from your board from a supervision standpoint. Now, you could also, the workaround with that one is you could say, hey, look, I'm going out on a contract. I'm hiring, X number organization. Here's their credentials, or here's this person's credentials, and that kind of stuff, to be kind of on the lookout for that. But board composition, it is consistently coming up over and over and over and over and over. And that's one of their big sticking points. The other thing is that tends to be a sticking point is events. We in the past have gotten requests for $10,000 to $15,000 for a one-day event, and they tend not to fund those because their thought, generally speaking, is, okay, if we have $10,000, what are we getting for the $10,000? I mean, and literally, we've gotten a request for a speaker that was $10,000, and that one lasted all of about 2 seconds. They were just, and I know this person was probably great and wonderful, but let me also go back. When they review these grants, nobody knows what everybody else has got. So the art folks just looking at art grants, the medical folks are just like medical. And so there's not an assigned amount of money per category. They basically are eligible to select the top 5 to 7 in each category. They determine how much money they want to assign to those. And then that all comes to me, and I add them all up and hope and pray we come really close to how much money that we have available. And if it's over when it goes to the grants committee, that's the ones that start doing the cutting. And so so there's not any cross pollination, and I don't share with them. I tell them, like, you got to make the best decisions in this category. You can't worry about what's on. So I know in the past I've had a question: can I apply in more than one category? Not for the same project, but you could most certainly. If you've got 2 different ideas that fit kind of 2 different categories, you could go in 2 different directions. That's up to you. I won't say that happens a lot that they fund to, but it has happened in the years past. But getting back to events, I think you just have to kind of figure out, like, what's the best bang for the buck. Now, you could have an event that's one day that, and I'll just use Mari because she's sitting here looking at me, but the recycling events tend to be a one-day event. However, then she can turn around and talk about, we were able to pull 200 tons of electronics out of the landfill, or keep it from going to the landfill. And so that's a little bit different. But when you have, I would say speakers is probably the biggest pinch point, or we have had some pretty expensive or elaborate volunteer events. And I know you want to thank your volunteers, but you just probably won't get to do it with our money, to be honest with you. So they tend to be more focused on kind of direct benefits or direct programming. The question that I get some, will you cover operating? Yes, we will. I think we're the only game in town that will do operating. However, the one thing you've got to keep in your mind when you're asking for that money is, maybe trying to explain why you need it this year. Maybe you had a funder that inexplicably just dropped out and you weren't expecting it. And so you need kind of some time to figure that out. Because the question the panel will ask is that, okay, what's their plan for next year? Or maybe it's going to take you 2 years to get out of that hole. Just tell them that. Say, look, we've got this plan in place and we hope to be able to do X, Y, and Z, down the road. And I know this is kind of a touchy subject, but is the need a real need? I mean, they do really look at duplications. I mean, do we need yet another X when we don't have a Y? Is it an unmet need? And I will tell you, a lot of times during those conversations around that table, I've picked up the phone or we've kind of called a timeout and we said, hey, so-and-so's doing this. Can y'all, work together? I have had a no before, which kind of shocked me. They did not want to work with the other organization, which was kind of sad because they missed out on some money. But that's your call. That's not my call for sure. And I don't know. There might have been some other issues there, but they do kind of look at the relevancy of the need, and that's one reason, or that's one thing I think this community impact money is kind of flexible. Is that if there's an uptick in a need in a particular area, I know. I say this a lot, and this is true, I think, for statewide and national funders, is that, topics are, they're cyclical, and right now mental health is a big hot button topic. Foster care is another hot bucket right now. But then a few years ago, it was obese children, not to say that's not important anymore, but, it just kind of does this. And I know as someone seeking funds, that's extremely frustrating. But we do try to work across the board. And so it's not to say that an obese kid project would not get funded, because if that's still a need in our community, it may not be from a state and a nationwide purpose. It may not be, but that's something to kind of think about as you go through this. So does anybody else have any other questions right now while I kind of take a breath? I've either done a great job and answered all your questions or done a terrible job and not provided any helpful information whatsoever. So one or the other. So, all right. Gila thinks I've covered most of my bases. Thank you, Gila.
I have a quick question. Kim, did
Sure.
you say that the innovation grants are not coming in this year? So if that's the case, what is the cycle for these?
Honestly, that's a very good question, Maury. I think the innovation grants might be coming back, but not this year. We've been working on a little bitty project called the Connector, and it has literally consumed all of our lives. And so it was just more, quite honestly, full confession here, it's just more than I could handle this year, because the innovation grants take a good bit more work from a due diligence standpoint and the process. And so, my gut feeling is you might see them again next year. But not, there won't be an innovation grant this year. And, if something happens, we end up having a lot, if all of a sudden somebody drops some money in our lap and we can do a mid-year, round just for innovation, we could consider that too. But right now, the Connector project is front of everything. So, and kudos to, there's several people on this call who've been helpful, and thank you to all of you who are doing testing. That is, I cannot tell you how important. Tara wrote me in last week and I was doing some testing Friday afternoon, and I'm just telling y'all, it's going to blow your minds. It's literally going to blow your minds. Just the functionality of that software and how, at the end of the day, how we're really going to help these families. It's going to be a game changer for not only the agency side and nonprofit side, but also these families. We can really kind of figure out what's going on and really try to help them. So, but yeah, Marty, I think for this year, there won't be an innovation round, but there might be an idea that progress. And that kind of brings up another question I had thought didn't put on my list. But the question of asking, we don't necessarily want you to create a new program to get new funding, because we do, fund things repeatedly. However, if you're kind of asking for repeat funding for the same project, I would highly recommend making sure in your narrative section that you talk about how that money was impactful, what you were able to do, because we've got some we have funded multiple years, and I will tell you those are kind of get discussed a little more stringently, I guess I could say, is the foundation now all of a sudden a line item in the budget, and people just automatically assume. And I will tell you, there's been some years where they just pulled it out, and it just made my heart just hurt. But ultimately it's their call. And so I just think it's just vitally important, particularly if you're asking for, subsequent year funding for the same thing, to talk about the benefits and how it's helped the community or blah, 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 blah. I think that's really, really important. Another question that popped in my head is, how much can I ask for? That's always a very popular question. How much can I ask for? There's, and I used to write grants for a living 150 years ago. And there's two schools of thought, is one of which is, I'm going to ask for, the sun, the moon, and the stars, and, and I'll just get whatever I can get. I will tell you, from our panel standpoint, if it's so out of line, that's the quickest way to get yourself taken off the table. The quickest way. If it's I can't tell you, every year we get 2 to 3 requests for over $100,000 or 150,000. And I mean, we're not going to give somebody half the money unless you're literally solving, cancer or something. I mean, it's got to have, and I say the more you request, the more impact you've got to have, i.e., it's got to go across a large population base, or it's had like 0 to no funding, and you just kind of discover this new area of need in the community. And so, but it's got to be balanced between how much you ask versus, the impact. And so if it's a big request, I'm not saying, and we have done $25,000 grants, outside of the innovation, but you might better cover all 3 counties, and you might better be doing something fairly significant. The one thing that helps a lot, I think, is how can you leverage our funds? Is there, if I were to get, $10,000 from you guys, then I have other funders that I can use that as match money, or I can, parlay that into something else. I know there for a while, we had a couple of folks at the university who needed some demonstration money to apply for NIH money. And so they would do a Power the Purse grant, which was that $2,000 was just enough to do basically like proof of concept. So then they could roll that to a much bigger grant. We love those kind of things. We love to have our money leveraged. We love to any kind of collaboration. And if you're not sure, is anybody doing this in the community? Here again, email me, call me, and I'm more than happy to kind of help, find you a new best friend. And that's one of the things that we loved about the innovation grants, is there were some unlikely partners that got pulled together on some of those that otherwise would not have been at the table. And we love to see that. We love collaboration. So that's another area to think about. And the other side is, and I'll just, I mean, you can do whatever you want to with your own time, but I would not sit down and fill out a community impact grant for $1,000 to $3,000. It's just too much work. It's just too much work for that little amount of money. So the 5 to 12-ish, maybe 15-ish is probably our sweet spot. And here again, we try to like the money to go as far as we possibly can, but just know that, I wouldn't like kill myself going to, all that trouble for that amount of money. And also too, I will tell you too, just because you don't get funded doesn't necessarily mean it's dead in the water. I obviously I'll read every one of these, and I kind of commit them to memory. I have like my little sticky notes in this chair that I'm privileged to sit in every day. I never know what's going to happen. I mean, I was at something a few weeks ago, and somebody mentioned that there was a particular need that they had. I got a postcard from a group in Atlanta yesterday, and they're funding that very specific thing. So I immediately called them up and said, hey, this is crazy. You won't believe this, but I just got this grant opportunity for this thing in Atlanta. And they're funding outside the metro Atlanta area. And so if I know what you guys are needing money for, You know, if something pops up, I immediately will get it to you. And or donors come in here sometimes going, I don't know what in the world, what's going on in our community? How can I help? And so, or they may have a passion for something very specific. And so we try to drive them to those organizations that we feel are doing a good job and who are working in that space. So it never hurts for me to kind of know what you're thinking about, and or maybe somebody else in the community is having the same thought, and we need to get you guys together to do that. So, but going back to the conversation about the money, you know, I think just kind of common sense on it to a certain extent, just kind of think through what you're wanting to do and where is the money, you know, best spent. Because I do know sometimes people can use or want to use our money for, oh gosh, I should have mentioned this too. We do not pay a set overhead rate. And I know that may only apply to university type folks, but we do not pay overhead as a flat rate. Now, if you want to hire an intern or something that says it's going to cost, I don't know, let's just say $8,000 to pay for an intern, then we'll just pay just like we'll give you money to pay the intern. But we do not, as a rule. I know in my old days of writing state and federal grants, there was a certain amount of money that you immediately wrote in as a percentage of the grant for overhead, and we don't do that. And you can't use our money to pay for grant writers. You can't use our money for to improve a building that you don't own. So if you rent a facility, we can buy desks, we can buy computers, you know, all those kind of things, those furnishings, but whatever we purchase has to be able to be carted out of there if you move at some point in the future. So we can't improve a privately held building. That's against our rules. So I'm trying, but the main thing is you should read the guidelines. Just make sure, you know, you can't take our money and turn around and grant it to somebody else. I say the only thing that I would, the only kind of mouse print to that one, and I'll just use like Open Hands, for instance. If Open Hands ask us for money to help pay local folks utility bills and stuff like that, that's not necessarily re-granting to us. We don't consider that re-granting. But if you were, you know, trying to raise money, I got this request last year. Somebody was trying to do 3 scholarships and they wanted us to give the money to them to do the scholarships. We can't, you know, we can't do that. Or if you want to set up your own grant program, you can't grant our money doing that. So, but any other questions anybody might have? I don't want to hang on here. I would answer questions about the connector, but I don't even know if I know enough right now to even answer those. So other than that, it's going to be wonderful. So, and please, 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 if you are one of our testing folks, please, 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 Tara and Julie are sending out stuff as we speak. We're just a smidge behind. They made some significant ask of the software developer a couple of weeks ago, and it's taken them a little bit longer to get that worked out. So his deadline was Friday and he got it to us yesterday. So we're just a smidge behind with that. But again, and we'll actually, and if you don't get in on the first round, then we will be rolling you to a later implementation date. But anyway, that's April 16th will be here before we know it. So I know poor Gila and Evie. Woof, that was a rough November, December, but I can promise you the connector in all its glory will be absolutely nothing other than the common application. And there's been some tweaks to that too, but it will be nothing like any of you experienced that first round. It was one of those very expensive lessons learned, but now we know. Now we know. So I don't want to keep everybody hanging on here because everybody's got plenty of things to do today. And we actually have a pretty decent day today. A little chilly, but not, at least it's not rainy. All right, let's see. I think I've got may have one question in. If not, give everybody just one more minute if you got some in here. All right, I don't think I have any more questions. Y'all know my email is Kim, Kim at CFWG.net. If you need to email me about anything, if you get into the application and you feel like based on the eligibility quiz, you think you should have been eligible to apply and it didn't let you in, let me know. And like I said, if you'll hold off today, nobody please go run out and do your applications. I've got to fix this one process that's in there. But I hope to have that finished by the end of the day today. If I've got somebody testing it right now. So if it works for them, then I know I've done it right, and I'll repeat it for the other processes that are coming up. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great day. Hang on, Patrick, if you got, I'm on, wait, give me 1 second. I want to see if you need to go on, click off your phone. Okay, we're all good. Thank you. See you later. Bye.